Shalom, this is Daniel John Lee with Torah Restoration Ministries. It is Thursday night, April the 2nd, 2015. It is dark here on the West Coast, and the 14th day of Aviv has officially begun. Now, this year in 2015, the Orthodox Jews actually don't start the day of Passover until tomorrow night. They're a day off just because they go by a pre-calculated calendar based off Hillel of the 4th century rather than the true biblical calendar. You can find out more about that on my website. But nevertheless, tonight, Thursday night, April 2nd, 2015, the Passover day begins, the 14th day of Aviv. It starts tonight when the sun was down and darkness settled over the land. That's when Passover day started. Passover goes from tonight until tomorrow night, Friday night, April 3rd. It is tomorrow evening, as the sun is setting at twilight, that we are to have the Passover dinner as described in Exodus 12, where we eat the lamb, the unleavened bread, and the bitter herbs. You eat that at twilight as the Passover day ends, and it goes into the first day of unleavened bread, which begins tomorrow night as the weekly Sabbath begins. First day of unleavened bread is also a high Sabbath, and that kicks off 7 days of unleavened bread, or Passover week, as I like to call it. The Feast of First Fruits will be the morrow after the Sabbath within that Feast of Unleavened Bread, 7 days, that starts tomorrow night. Of course, that falls on the this upcoming Sunday, the day after Shabbat. And then the 7th day of Unleavened Bread, the final high Sabbath of this initial spring feast, will be on April 10th. I wanted to, first of all, wish everyone a very happy Passover. I selected this picture here because not only is it beautiful, but it reminds me of Passover because of the red wine, but I specifically chose this picture because you'll notice the bread that is photographed in this picture is not unleavened bread. It's actually, that bread's all puffed up. It's leavened. And I chose this picture on purpose because technically you are still allowed to have leavened bread. You can eat leavened bread tonight. This is the day of the Passover. This is the day in which we're to clean out all of our leaven. We are to slaughter the lamb and cook it and roast it over a fire. So this is the day to do it. But technically, the 7 days of unleavened bread have not begun yet. It is tomorrow night, as darkness falls across the land, that you are to make sure you have no leaven within any of your dwellings, and that for the next 7 days you don't eat unleavened bread. But today, on the day of the Passover, you technically still can have leaven, although it's probably not a good idea because we should be using this day as a Passover as a preparation day for the high Sabbath that begins the first day of unleavened bread. And so this is a day that we should be cleaning out all of our leaven. In fact, when I got home from work this afternoon, I cleaned out all the leaven from my house. I made sure I had some bread and I had some chips with leaven in it and I had some things in my cupboards. So I went through my whole house and I did a full deep cleaning, and I got all the leaven products into a trash bag and I threw it out. I wanted to make sure all the leaven. And why do we do that? To make sure we don't accidentally eat any leaven during the 7 days of unleavened bread. And that also goes for things like baking soda and baking powder. These are things that maybe are not leaven in and of themselves, but they really, the only purpose they have is to cook them with leaven. Yeah, I suppose you could use baking powder as to brush your teeth or to clean, but I think it's a good idea to throw those things out. And that way you have nothing to accidentally allow you to sin in terms of eating leaven during those 7 days of unleavened bread, which is an important thing to obey. I'm making this Passover as the Passover day is beginning, the 14th day of Aviv is beginning, even though tomorrow night is the night that we have the actual Passover dinner, the full Seder with the lamb, the bitter herbs, the unleavened bread, maybe some carousel if you make it, the grape juice or wine, and when you have the full dinner as described in Exodus 12. It is tomorrow during the day that Yahshua was actually crucified. Actually, it happens on Friday this year. It doesn't always happen on Friday every year, but this year it does. He actually gets crucified tomorrow when the lambs are being slaughtered, and then tomorrow night is when he gets laid into the grave, or just before sunset he gets laid into the grave, and that's when we have the Passover dinner as we go into the first day of unleavened bread. I wanted to read an article that from my website that I'm not sure if people know about this article or if people have been reading this article, but it is located on my website. It's under, it's actually highlighted in the recommended readings for the week. If you click on that link, it'll take you to a series of articles about calculating the new year and Passover. But there's one particular article that I want to read called Passover 2010, Blood Washed, Blood Soaked, Redeemed. And this is just an article about how to properly keep Passover, because last year I made a video right around Passover where I said, why do we do Passover? But here I'm going to get into the nuts and bolts of how do you do a Passover? How do you do a biblical Passover? And I'm not interested in mimicking the Orthodox Jews because they got a lot of Talmudic pagan stuff that they've attached to the Passover. I want to do what the Bible says how to do Passover, what Yahshua did when he kept the Passover. So I'm going to read this article. It is on my website. I'll provide the link to this article in below this video, but I'm going to read it for those interested in how to keep a biblical Passover. A number of people have asked me to write a Passover article. I've asked Abba to help me write this to the best of my ability. With that said, I by no means intend to be exhaustive. Yah's Spirit must guide you into all truth. This, as everything I write, is meant to be a primer or a beginner, to point you in the right direction. Yah may even show you things I have not yet discovered, as his Torah is depthless, and we continue to mine more treasures from his precepts each and every time we dig. Hallelujah. First, a timeline of the Passover feast. And this is something you may want to write down, because this is kind of charts the timeline of this feast that we're entering into tonight. Number one, first of all, the first day of Aviv, the renewed year. This happened 14 days ago. Back in 2010 when I wrote this, it happened from sunset 4:14 to sunset 4:15. This year, of course, it happened much earlier. It happened, right after the spring equinox on the evening of March 20th to the evening of March 21st was the new year. First day of spring. And let's see, this was confirmed by two major, this is something that pretty much applies to 2010. Let's see here. The 10th day of Aviv, Lamb Day, will happen from sunset April 23rd. Okay, this again is for 2010. Lamb Day this year happened 4 days ago. This is the day we are to select and purchase our 1-year-old without blemish lambs or goats in preparation for the Passover feast, even though it occurs on a Shabbat this year. Okay, that's for 2010. Sorry, some of these details are not relevant for this year because some of this was just for 2010. Remember, every year the Passover happens on a different day. 14th day of Aviv, Passover. This is a work day, so it's not a Sabbath. It's a busy preparation day of slaughtering and cooking the lamb and also getting all the leaven out of your dwelling places. 15th day of Aviv is the first day of unleavened bread. This is a high Sabbath. This is where we eat the lamb, the bitter herbs, and the unleavened bread. The whole 24-hour period is a high Shabbat, a day of rest, and a most solemn feast day. Then you have the 7 days of unleavened bread. And then you have the Feast of the Bikurim, which is the Feast of First Fruits. This is the day all the children of Israel, in accordance with Leviticus 23:10, would bring the first fruits of their barley harvest to the high priest away from the temple. Yahshua is the first fruit from among the dead. This is also the day that Yahshua rose up to the Father, ascended to the Father. So that always happens on a Sunday. It happens on the morrow after the Sabbath. 21st day of Aviv is the 7th day of unleavened bread. That will happen, this year it will happen on April 10th. It's a high Sabbath. This is the closing celebration of the Passover week, and probably also the day the walls of Jericho came a-tumbling down, Victory Day. Okay, now that we have the timeline firmly established, let's go into what we do for this celebration. Personal tradition. This is not commanded in the Torah. However, what I like to do on the evening going into the 14th day of Aviv, which happens to be tonight. Tonight we're going into Passover. Tomorrow night we'll be going out of Passover into the first day of unleavened bread. What I do, and actually I did this tonight after it was dark out and the 14th day of Aviv had started. I did this, and I've already done this, but I like to set out 5 pieces of unleavened bread on a plate, and I have 5 cups of wine or grape juice. And with the music of the movie Schindler's List playing in the background, I read through the 4 gospel accounts of Yahshua's Last Supper with his disciples. I also read the 5th gospel, the book of Revelation, from Revelation 19, in which the marriage supper of the Lamb occurs, and Yahshua at last drinks the wine with us anew in his kingdom, which he references in the gospel accounts. I eat a piece of unleavened bread and drink a cup for each of the 5 readings, and I did that tonight. So it's a nice way to sort of kick off the Passover feast season. Okay, now the next things I'm going to read are actual Torah commands. This is something we need to do because Yahshua commands it. 10th of Aviv, you select your lamb. This is in Exodus 12, 3 through 6. You pick a lamb or a goat. It needs to be a 1-year-old lamb or goat without blemish, and you get to know it, pet it, snuggle with it, etc. for the next 4 days. Make sure all leaven, bread products, or anything with leaven is removed from your dwelling place and carved before tomorrow night. 14th of Aviv, this all comes from Exodus 12. You have the lamb or goat slaughtered, the blood drained, skinned, no bones broken. You roast with fire. The whole lamb as a body roasted over fire. No water is to be used. Eat with the lamb bitter herbs, example, horseradish or parsley and unleavened bread. Place blood from the slaughtered lamb or goat on the door of your dwelling place on both sides and the top. Often as the blood trickles down, it forms a cross. While the killing and cooking of the lamb is done during the afternoon of the 14th of Aviv, the actual Passover meal occurs that evening as it transitions into the 15th of Aviv, which again is tomorrow night. If there's any lamb leftovers, they must be completely burned. Anything left over by the morning of the 15th of Aviv, this year by Saturday morning, needs to be completely burned. That's in Exodus 12, verse 10. And then finally in Exodus 12:48, we read, "And when a stranger shall sojourn with you and will keep the Passover to Yahweh, let all his males be circumcised, and then let him come near and keep it. And he shall be as one that is born in the land, for no uncircumcised person shall eat thereof. One Torah shall be to him that is homeborn, and unto the stranger that sojourns with you. Any male which wishes to eat the Passover lamb must be circumcised in heart and flesh. Eat the lamb in haste. You should have staves of wood in your hands as if you're about to go on a journey, and your feet should be shod." And number 8, as you do the above things, explain to your children why you are doing these things. You can learn the why by reading and praying over Exodus chapter 12. By the way, Exodus 12 should be your primer when you go through this feast tomorrow night, this dinner. 7 days of unleavened bread. Eat nothing with leaven in it, absolutely nothing. This symbolizes the purity Messiah fills us with through his precious blood atonement. The first day of unleavened bread is a high Sabbath, a holy gathering, eating the Passover and then making sure all leftover lamb is burned before the 16th of Aviv. No work is to be done. 7th day of unleavened bread, which is a high Sabbath. That'll begin the evening of April 9th, going to the evening of April 10th this year. That'll be the following Friday, so a week from tomorrow. It's a high Sabbath or a holy gathering. I sincerely believe the 7 days of unleavened bread coincided with the 7 days the children of Israel marched around Jericho. So this would be a day of shouting, praise, and victory. No work is to be done. Feast of First Fruits. On the morrow after the Sabbath, within the 7 days of unleavened bread, since there is no temple, this is difficult to celebrate because there is no temple. However, this would be a day to remember that Messiah ascended to the Father as the first fruit wave offering. 1 Corinthians 15 should be read. While this is not a Sabbath, it is definitely a significant day as it marks the countdown to Shavuot or Pentecost. Having some barley and dancing with it is fun, or dipping it in oil and laying it somewhere special. Fun traditions to do for Passover. Again, these things are not commanded in Scripture, but they're fun things to do. The Passover feast itself should be a solemn occasion as it is observing the death and burial of the Messiah of Israel. However, with children present, some lightness can be done, such as having the children removing the last of the leaven and having them go on a treasure hunt to plunder the Egyptians. Gold-wrapped chocolate coins are always a nice touch to a Passover feast. Singing hymns is also encouraged. During Passover week, enjoy yourself. This is a celebration. It's the beginning of spring. So go outside and enjoy nature. Treat yourself. Spend time with the saints. This is a time of revival and purity. The resurrection should be celebrated on the Sabbath day, the first Sabbath day within the 7 days, because that is the day Yahshua arose. Remember, he was in the ground for 3 days and 3 nights. So if he was buried Wednesday before the sunset, then he would have to rise before the sunset on Sabbath for him to be in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights. So he did rise on the Sabbath day, and then he ascended to the Father the next day on Sunday, which would be First Fruits Sunday. As long as the above things are done in Torah, the sky is the limit on what you may want to do during the 7 days of Passover. Have fun. This is supposed to be a vacation. Conclusion. If you cannot get the lamb or do all that is stipulated in Torah, do the best you can. Yah extends much mercy to those who have pure hearts wanting to please the Father. Maybe you could just buy some lamb from the local grocery store. That's fine. Just do the best you can. While we are in exile, that is all Yah expects. I have intentionally left out much of the symbolism and meanings in Passover because this is something you are to see by reading the Torah and the Brit Hadashah and faithfully teaching this to your children. I refuse to take the place of Yah's Spirit, and those who love Yah will hear his voice and be diligent to study his word. Here are some scriptures to meditate on during the 7 days of Passover. 1, Exodus 12. 2, Leviticus 23, 5 through 14. 3, Numbers 28, 16 through 25. 4, Deuteronomy 16, 1 through 8. A special note, since no temple exists, the place Yah has placed his name is in our hearts. The lamb can be done where we gather. This does not apply to any other animal sacrifice because this is the only sacrifice which the common people can eat. Number 5, Joshua 5, 2 through 6. Joshua 5:2 through Joshua 6:27. That whole passage encompassing those 2 chapters. Number 6, the 4 gospel accounts of the Last Supper, which I went through tonight. Number 7, 1 Corinthians 15:20 through 22. It talks about the first fruits. And number 8, Revelation 19:7 through 10. So please enjoy your Passover. Happy Passover 2015. Shalom.